most people who are educators have quite a good reading culture themselves. They love reading, they're used to reading, they read books, they read magazines, they read newspapers, they read articles online, they do all sorts of reading. But when it comes to school, as Betsy says, a lot of things are not necessarily always there, and it's not because you guys said, no, we don't want to create reading cultures in our schools, but you just haven't had time or resources to be able to do it. So it's important to take some of the recommendations that Betsy has made and also look at some of the examples internationally of what different people do to encourage reading in their schools. So what will I talk about? I'll talk about 4 things. The first thing, something I'm very passionate about, is what is the future demand and why is reading important for the future? And then building on what Betsy said, I'm just going to give you some advice and some practical tips that we've observed, both in my previous work in a consulting firm, as well as in Future Learn, around what you can do today. Not tomorrow, not next week, not next year. What can you do today to improve the reading in your schools? And then I'll share 5 seconds about what we do, and you're welcome to ask questions afterwards. Learners today, what you must remember, are digital natives. And what that means is people who were brought up or born during the age where technology became so familiar. So for some of the older people amongst us, when you were born, there were no TVs necessarily, there were no phones that were widely used. Maybe there were still telegrams, and as time has evolved, and even between the time when most of you were born and I was born and today, things have completely changed. And today, children at the age of 1, of 2, even my nephew who's 1.5 years old, can unlock my iPhone and find a game. Which when I was 1 year old, I was getting dirty outside, not eating ants and all sorts of things. So as this picture displays, a lot of children have access to computers, have access to mobile phones, sometimes even access to smartphones, have access to tablets and so forth. This is what children engage every single day when they're not engaging in a book or when they're not watching a TV show. They even now watch TV online. Even I can't remember the last time I watched TV, because I watch everything online these days. But this is the reality that you guys are faced with, is you still have a very traditional school system that relies heavily on books. And me and Betsy were talking earlier that even for our own products that are like e-readers and so forth, a lot of people aren't using them because of various challenges. So you have an education system that's really focused on books, but you have these kids that are focused on digital devices. So a lot of them find it difficult and boring and a waste of time to read books because they can't make those connections like the little farmer boy about why reading is important, even for engaging the digital world. We also have to make sure that education in the modern world prepares learners for the future, and especially for the jobs of the future. So some of you might know this, some of you might know this, but I'll share with you 2 things. The first thing I'm going to share with you is, what are the jobs of the future? So what are the jobs that are going to become pervasive in 2020 and 2030 that your children in the schools will actually have to be well equipped to handle? And then what are the skill sets that are needed for those jobs? So you have everything. So there's a lot of digital work and also a lot of personal jobs that focus on healthcare. So you have app developers, nurse practitioners, security analysts, therapists, market research analysts, and even digital marketers, sonographers, hygienists, the list goes on. These are the top jobs of the future, according to a lot of research that's been done. So you won't have a lot of typists in the future. You won't necessarily have a lot of people who do manual labor because of automation and various disruptive technologies. All those jobs were replaced. And the jobs of the future will focus on digital skills as well as personal care skills. And that's actually the key of it. We're living longer, people are not dying. So there's going to be a lot of need for elderly care. It's a bit funny, but not really. So you're going to need a lot of help for personal care. But also, because of the advancement of technology, there's going to be a lot of people who use technology to treat different ailments and diseases and so forth. So therefore, those jobs are actually quite critical. So when people tell you jobs of the future, you normally think computers and something to do with building apps, but not all that stuff. These are the skills of the future according to the World Economic Forum. And these skills really focus on the ability to read, because complex problem solving, as automation and disruptive technology replaces a lot of manual labor, a lot of mundane tasks, you actually need to think. So children today are going to have to prepare themselves in their education to be able to think for the future. And as Betty said, you can't think if you can't read, if you can't understand the language that you're reading, if you can't actually make meaningful connections and build on that knowledge. Also critical thinking, creativity, people management. So these are the skill sets that as education practitioners, as educators in classrooms, as policymakers, we need to think about how do we ensure that our curriculum, our teaching practices, and the way we engage children enable them to have these skill sets in the future. And what resources and materials do we put in place to enable them to be relevant in the future? Also, the future of reading is very, very fast. So for a lot of you who don't necessarily have all the materials in your school, most communities and urban centers have access to libraries. Talk to the library, partner with the library to encourage both not only the learners, but the teachers and the parents to get involved in education. And what I liked from this is it highlighted the point that Betty made. It starts from the top. It starts with the principal and all the teachers and the entire staff of the school getting involved in reading, demonstrating and being role models to children for reading. Reading doesn't end in language. Reading doesn't end in reading a book or reading a piece of text. Literacy moves across the different subjects. And as Betsy highlighted, it goes to mathematics, it goes to science, but also it goes to technology. So how do we, as education professionals, as educators, as teachers, as principals, actually teach children not only how to understand technology, but how to use technology responsibly? Because we also know there's lots of dangers to technology. So you don't want to always open up the internet and all its dark corners to all the children. But how do you actually teach them how to use different tools? And you saw they were doing PowerPoint, they were using videos, they were using different elements. They were talking about personal stories. They had to actually go into the computer and comprehend and be able to pick the words and items that they want to use in their presentation. This is where the future of education could be heading. Whether it ends up there, who knows? A lot of children, especially young children, first learn how to hear and speak words before they actually see them spelled. If you think about any 4 or 5-year-old child, they don't know how to read, they don't know how to write, but they can speak and they can hear words. So what's nice about this is if you let children take pictures, it's a very innovative way of saying, okay, now I've seen something, let me see how it's spelled. And I can associate different sounds and letters with that object. So I thought that was interesting. So you can also use your phone. Luckily, most smartphones these days come with cameras. So you can even get your kids in the class to take pictures of different items, even on the weekend. Then they can come and say, okay, you took 3 pictures of things that you know and 5 pictures of things that you don't know, and they'd spend, 30 minutes in the class going through things that they don't know and how you actually spell them so they can associate the hearing and the speaking with the actual language. TED Talk is basically random people stand on a stage for 10 minutes and say something about something. And it's a medium. It's free. It's on YouTube, and you can get TED Talks on education, on geography, on science, on politics, whatever you can think of. And it's basically a way to share information globally for free and to increase access to information. So what was started about a year ago was these TED Ed Talks, which are accessible for free online, where you can learn about different topics and hear from different experts from around the world about how they deal with different challenges in the classroom. So I'll really encourage you to check it out. Especially if you don't have like millions and millions of rands of resources. So now that I've shown you all those things, I'm going to basically repeat and build on what Betsy said in terms of what can you actually do today. And the reason I use the word today is because we typically talk about I will do this tomorrow, and then tomorrow never comes. Like, I was going to go to the gym tomorrow, and I was going to take the car for a service tomorrow, and whatever. So it's important that you actually start doing these things today. So you can promote it through leadership. So you've seen some of the examples, you've heard what Bessie said regarding it starts with the principal, and it starts with you as an educator being an example to the children about reading. I think one important point is we shouldn't just assume that if you as a principal go to your teachers and say, I read, I love reading, this is our culture, that'll just automatically happen. Not every single teacher necessarily had the opportunity to read all their life, didn't have necessarily access to books all their life for pleasure. So there's a bit of teacher development, a bit of training and support that you as a principal or school management team will have to provide to teachers in order to enable them to be examples to children. Again, something that's very important to me is integrating the learning. So if children see subjects and contents as separate from each other, they typically get bored because, we live in an ADD age. So how do you make sure that whatever they learn in English or in Afrikaans regarding the comprehension of language gets translated into whatever they do in science and maths and whatever they do in other subjects? You have to integrate the learning and not only teach reading or encourage reading in an English or Afrikaans or whatever other language you use setting, but enforce it in all the learning that they do in the school. Rewards and gamification are super important. People love getting stuff for free. It's a common phenomenon. If I told you now there's a competition for whoever remembered the last video, you'd all be recalling what you did or looking if you took a photo. People love stuff for free. So why not exploit that by putting little duckies or whatever you have as your resource to give those rewards and gamification, but it's important not to make it forced. So that's a point I really agree with Betsy. Do not make it forced, make it fun. So if I don't feel like playing this week, you don't have to. But just know that, if you see all your friends getting free stuff and you don't have free stuff, trust me, you'll want some free stuff. And leverage technology. So you shouldn't see technology as a substitute to book reading. You shouldn't see technology as a threat to reading. Even now, I read less books, but I read a lot more because I'm reading on my phone all the time. I'm reading emails. I'm reading billboards. I watch quite a few films in different languages, so now I'm even reading movies. So there's different ways you can read. It doesn't just mean reading in a book. So how do you leverage technology? And also leveraging technology doesn't mean spending money on smart boards and fancy green screens and all that stuff. It just means how do you use the resources that are available to your learners at home or in the school environment to enable them to be able to read better. So I'm not an educator. I don't have a PhD or a master's in education. I'm actually, for my sins, a chartered accountant and spent a lot of time in finance and so forth. But because education is such an important thing in our country, I decided to take quite a bit of a pay cut and join a company and transform a company that's trying to help focus on how do we help support education. And we're a bit different to what normal companies do. So the two things that make us different is, number one, we actually want to help the government. So for the last 2 days, I've spent a long time in meetings with the DBE talking about the future of the Schools Act and so forth. And we're giving them resources because we feel as private sector, you have to get involved. You can't just sit and complain and say, oh, things are not happening. What are you doing? What are you doing to help the public sector? And secondly, we are partnering with different companies. So normally companies want to work alone and want to make the best profit. But we're saying we're all trying to achieve the same thing. We're all trying to help educate children in South Africa. Why don't we work together? So instead of me sitting with 10 Rand and you sitting at 10 Rand and competing, let's take 20 Rand, develop a better solution and share the spoils. So that's what we're doing differently. Whether it works and I'm bankrupt in a year or two, who knows? But at least we try. So what we did was we formed a company called FutureLearn, and very briefly, FutureLearn hopes to reimagine education. We might succeed, we might fail, but we want to be a catalyst for innovation. We want to actually not sit back as South Africa and say, oh, we're not a rich country, we have so many problems, what can we do? But say, okay, with our problems and with our challenges, how can we innovate and make sure that we increase the quality of education that children receive, both in independent schools and in private sector. So we took over a company called Impact, which is a curriculum provider, and there's a few of our books displayed there. And we're going to really transform this company away from just being a provider of books and resources to rather being an education solution provider that focuses on what are the different solutions in terms of technology and products that actually are helpful in learning, and how do you transform the role of the teacher and not replace the role of the teacher. I think teachers are extremely important in education, but how do you enable them to do more with the same amount of resources? Second thing we did, whether it was a good decision or not, we decided to open a school. And we're not like these other education groups that want to open 50 campuses across the country. We just want to open one school. And we've been a bit brave because we opened the school for two reasons. The first reason is we were not able to find a school that wanted to do the future of learning. We weren't able to convince the government to let us experiment in the school to do the future of learning. So we said, okay, we'll just take all our money and put it in the school and hope for the best. And in this school, the first thing we're trying to do is innovate around the future of learning. So how do you deliver high quality education using all the cool stuff, but at a low cost? Because in South Africa, we don't have the benefit of having, extremely wealthy people everywhere. And our hope is we can invite other schools and whether they're public or private to say, here's one way of doing things differently. And you can, for free, take this and apply it in your school. The second reason why we opened the school is we want to better inform our first company. So a lot of the time, when people run education companies, they don't actually know the challenges and the nitty-gritty. So I've learned the hard way that it's a nightmare to actually open a school. And everything goes wrong, from children breaking toilets to, but you can't get angry because they're kind of cute. But that's the second thing. How do you actually inform the education sector? And we've invited a lot of people to come and actually see what we're doing and say, now these are the actual challenges. Now you can see them live. How do you enable teachers and school management and principals to do things differently? A third thing we're doing is saying, the future is technology. So how do we in South Africa stop copying America, stop copying Europe, copying other countries, and actually develop technology in education that talks to our needs? So we're very far from doing anything fancy or noticeable. But one thing we did do is we found two very smart guys who live about 5 kilometers away from here, who saw there's a lot of teachers in this country who are underpaid, if I'm frank, and they're actually quite good. Then you have a lot of students who are in under-resourced schools, don't have access to right teaching, don't even have access to schooling maybe, are being taught at home by their parents who might not have access. So you have this pool of knowledge of really good teachers and these students and learners who want to talk to these teachers, but they have no way of connecting. So they're trying to make like an Uber, if you want to call it that, where you can go online as a teacher, you can assist learners anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, to be able to learn, plus you earn money yourself. So that's the company called Tutor.me. You can check it out. There's also going to be some really, really cool developments happening later this year, so you can watch that space. So that's basically what we're doing as a company called FutureLearn. And I hope we don't go bankrupt, because then I'll have to go back to being an accountant. But hopefully it does work, and hopefully we do make an impact to educate children in South Africa.